Hello and welcome. In this video, I wanted to take a quick look at an interesting Necron list that I came across not too long ago. And while I know everything's going to change within the coming weeks due to a new chapter approved, I still think it'll be fun to take a look at a list like this. So let's see how this list did, as this list was played by a player named Daniel Seller, and it came 4th place out of 35 players in a tournament held on December 17th, 2022. This tournament was known as the Last Minute Rogue Trader Tournament at the Southern Cross Wargaming, and this tournament was held in Australia. Anyway, let's move on to the list itself. This list consists of a single battalion detachment composed of the custom dynasty of Relentlessly Expansionist and Eternal Conquerors. This is a very popular dynasty, and it allows it to have a 6-inch pre-game move, as well as all of your units gaining objective secured. It's incredibly powerful and one that you'll see very often. Anyway, let's take a look at the HQ choices for this battalion detachment, as there's quite a few of them. The HQ choices begin with one that we haven't seen for a little while, this one being Andrakir the Traveler. And Andrakir the Traveler is an interesting model, as he can be a little bit pricey and sometimes a little too expensive for some lists, but he does bring some interesting things to the table, such as the ability to give a unit of your choice +1 to their attack profile. In addition to that, he has many fun little bonuses, like an additional bonus to mobility, as well as the ability to mess with enemy vehicles a little bit. In any case, Andrakir is a very fun model, but he does require a certain type of list, and he doesn't fit into every Necron build. In this situation, Andrakir has been made the warlord of this army, and he's been given a warlord trait. The warlord trait that has been given is one that he's required to take, known as Impeccable Conqueror, and this is one of those traits that's just very good and you would take anyway. So it does make sense taking it on a character like Andrakir. For Impeccable Conqueror is an aura ability that says friendly Necron core units within 6 inches of the bearer of this trait can reroll their charge roll, and considering that Andrakir has that +1 attack buff to the melee profile, it definitely makes sense to take this trait, as it really does help melee units engage enemies, and the difference between a successful charge and a failed charge is pretty much the difference of winning or losing a game in many situations. Anyway, with that being said, we've covered Andrakir and we can move on to the next HQ choice. The second HQ choice in this situation is a Chronomancer, being armed with an Aeon Stave to keep his points cost low and being given a single relic known as the Veil of Darkness. We've seen the Veil of Darkness in most lists so far, and it's a very fantastic relic, allowing the Chronomancer to reposition himself as well as a unit of his choice anywhere on the table as long as it's 9 inches away from any enemy units. This definitely gives you a ton of mobility. However, the Veil of Darkness has fallen a tiny bit out of favor, but we'll see how it functions within this list in ways that make it make a lot more sense than it does in certain other lists we've seen in the past. And as for the third and final HQ choice for this battalion detachment, the third HQ choice is yet another cryptech known as the Technomancer. Once again, a very popular choice and a very powerful one. The Technomancer does give you a lot of support for your different units and is a reasonably low cost choice, even when given the Canoptic Cloak as this Technomancer has been given. The Canoptic Cloak does increase his mobility and allows him to repair units that are still alive as opposed to only ones that have been destroyed. In any case, the Technomancer is something we've seen very commonly and something that I believe we're going to see in the future going forward as long as there are no dramatic points changes on those different cryptic units. All in all, the HQ choices are rather standard for this list, being composed of 2 very powerful and popular cryptech units, as well as Andrakir, who, while not seeing the most amount of play and being a little bit of an oddball unit, is nothing new to certain Necron lists that we've seen in the past. However, this list does include one other unit that can be considered an HQ choice. In this case, this is a non-organization slot, utilizing the Dynastic Advisor ability to include yet another Chronomancer, meaning that this list actually goes up to 3 different cryptechs, 2 of them being Chronomancers. This Chronomancer does not have any relics or warlord traits, but he has been given an upgrade of an Entropic Lance, allowing him to be a little more of a heavy hitter. I'm guessing this was just a little bit of a point filler, and not necessarily something that was planned as an anti-heavy armor option. However, it is definitely a very nice weapon choice as far as different weapon choices go. In addition to an Entropic Lance, there is an additional 2 Crypto Thralls within the non-force organization slot. These 2 Crypto Thralls do make for decent objective gathering units, as well as rather solid support units for the different cryptechs. It's not necessarily certain which cryptech they're going to be accompanying, and they can accompany different cryptechs in different situations. However, in this case, I've grouped them with a non-force organization Chronomancer, simply for the sake of simplicity, as both of them kind of fit into the same unit role, and there's a very good chance that those Crypto Thralls would be accompanying the Chronomancer if they're not just out and about gathering objectives or being a general nuisance to your opponent. In either case, I do like seeing them kind of make a return in some Necron lists, considering they've kind of fallen out of the meta a little bit. Moving on from the HQ choices, we come to yet another large selection within this battalion detachment, that being the troop selection. And while many Necron lists have very basic troop choices, this list definitely brought something new to the table. This list has a total of 3 different HQ choices, but each of them are different from one another. The first of those HQ choices is probably the most standard one, being a unit of 5 Immortals armed with Gauss Blasters. The second of those troop choices is yet another unit of 5 Immortals, however in this situation they've been armed with Tesla Coils as opposed to those Gauss Blasters. And I'm not particularly a big fan of Tesla Coils, as while they give you the opportunity to make more shots and a little bit more range than the Gauss Blaster, they do lack any kind of armor penetration, making them a reasonably weaker choice than those Gauss Blasters in themselves, as the armor penetration does go quite a long way. However, in the world of things like Armor of Contempt, they definitely have a little bit more of a place in the game, and if memory serves me right, we have seen the Tesla Coils in the past, so they're not necessarily a completely unseen option, but I do think they are definitely a weaker one. However, considering that it's just a single unit of 5 Immortals, there's nothing wrong with experimenting with them a little bit, considering that the opportunity cost is relatively low by comparison. In any case, we move on to a third and final troop choice, which is one we haven't seen in a while, despite it being a very popular one when the 9th edition Necron Codex first came out. This is a unit of 20 Necron warriors armed with Gauss Reapers. The Gauss Reapers are definitely a powerful close range option and can put out quite an impressive amount of firepower in a unit of 20 such as this. Not only that, but the Necron warriors in a block of 20 are definitely more resilient, and considering we've been seeing the Necrons trend towards more of a resiliency style of play, it does make sense that we're seeing some of these Necron warrior blocks coming back into the meta. And combine that with the Veil of Darkness on that Chronomancer, and you definitely have a unit that's very powerful and can get into range very easily with those Gauss Reapers and cause absolute havoc. There are other units that you can use that Veil of Darkness on if you really so desire, and there can be games where you do use it on different units, but in the most generic situation, I do think Necron warriors armed with Gauss Reapers in such large quantities are definitely a very popular choice for that Veil of Darkness. In any case, good to see the Necron warriors making a comeback, and it's also nice to see that you can take a mix of Immortals and Necron warriors within the same list and do relatively fine. With that being said, we conclude the troop choice for this battalion detachment, and we move on to the lead choice, which is also rather action-packed. The lead choice once again begins with a unit that was rather popular, but has since fallen off a little bit within the Nephilim chapter approved. This is a unit of 7 Flayed Ones, and the Flayed Ones have been relegated a little bit to smaller units and ones that are more focused on objective gathering as opposed to being power units in themselves, like we saw them in lists in the prior chapter approved, where they were taken in massive quantities to essentially butcher any units that they came into contact with. A part of why this is probably the case is that we've seen more resilient armies, so the Flayed Ones have definitely become a little weaker than they were when they had a lot of squishy targets to focus on with their melee attacks. However, they're still perfectly fine, and they can definitely still be a nuisance in many situations. With that being said, we move on to the second elite choice for this battalion detachment. The second elite choice is a unit of 10 Lich Guard, being armed with hyperphase swords and dispersion shields. The Lich Guard are definitely another popular choice for the Veil of Darkness, but they're also a perfectly fine choice for that Andrakir the Traveler as well, in order to buff their attacks. And while the Lich Guard generally don't need much help with their different attacks, depending on what kind of resilient list we see within the meta, there is more reason to buff them with that additional point of attack so that they could take apart larger and more resilient enemy units. And that being said, when we look at the third elite choice for this army list, we do see yet another option that Andrakir can buff and do rather well with. That being another traditional melee choice for Necron armies, being a unit of 6 Scorpic Destroyers. The Scorpic Destroyers are definitely a very powerful unit and can really rival a lot of the different units already listed. However, unlike the Lich Guard, they are definitely more offensive focused than they are defensively focused like the Lich Guard can be. So there's definitely a bit of a trade-off there. Even though they fulfill similar roles, they do still have very distinct positions within an army and how they behave on the tabletop. This unit of 6 Scorpic Destroyers has also been accompanied by a non-force organization slot in the form of a Plasma Sight. That Plasma Sight can definitely overcharge your Scorpic Destroyers, even though it's a little bit risky, as it can destroy one of your Scorpic Destroyers just for getting the extra benefits that the Plasma Sight provides. However, that being said, combine them with Andrakir and other buff units within this army list, and you definitely see that they can be a very serious force to be reckoned with, and you're not necessarily confined to choosing the Lich Guard over the Scorpic Destroyers in any of the situations, and you're very flexible with what you can do with either of those units. As for the fourth and final elite choice, the fourth and final elite choice is a Transcendent Catan. The Transcendent Catan is definitely the lowest cost option out of any of the Catan shards available to the Necron forces. This Transcendent Catan has been armed with a special trait known as Cosmic Tyrant, and Cosmic Tyrant says you can use an additional Catan power if this unit did not advance or fall back within the turn. As such, you have to take into consideration the two different Catan powers that this Transcendent Catan has. The first one being Antimatter Meteor, which says you select the closest visible enemy unit within 24 inches, and you roll a d6. On a roll of 3 to 5, that unit suffers 3 mortal wounds, and if you happen to roll an unmodified 6, that unit suffers d3 plus 3 mortal wounds, which is definitely very painful and a rather powerful single target nuke. I do think this is a very powerful ability, and it's one that we've seen on many different Catans as an additional Catan power. As for the second Catan power, it's one that's a little more anti-swarm, that being the Sky of Falling Stars, which says you select 3 enemy units within 24 inches, and you roll a d6 for each of those units. And if that roll comes up as less than the number of models within that unit and is between 1 and 5, then that unit suffers d3 mortal wounds, and that's kind of a unique ability considering that it auto-fails on a 6 instead of a 1 like most abilities do. However, do keep in mind, you do want to target units with larger model counts, because the lower the model count, the harder it is to resolve, as your roll does have to be less than the model count within that unit. This makes it a rather good ability for targeting medium-sized units, but also one that's fine targeting swarm units as well. Sometimes you're forced to targeting smaller units, and then you kind of have to just kind of get lucky, but at the end of the day, you can definitely generate 3d3 mortal wounds spread across those different units, which makes it a rather powerful mortal wound generator, and combine that with the Antimatter Meteor, and you definitely have a lot of ability to deal quite a good amount of mortal wounds with this Transcendent Catan, 2 different types of targets, so you have a lot of versatility as well. In any case, it's a powerful model, and one that your opponents are going to have some difficulty dealing with, considering that they also have to focus on all of those other resilient powerful models, such as the Lich Guard, the unit of 20 Necron Warriors, and even the Scorpic Destroyers. However, this list does not end with a lead choice, but rather has a fast attack choice and a heavy support choice as well. The fast attack choice is a rather boring one, being composed of 2 different fast attack choices, and each of those fast attack choices is a unit of 5 Canoptic Scarab Swarms, which are definitely great for taking objectives and positioning on the table with their low profile that can easily hide behind terrain, making it difficult for your opponent to deal with, and they can be a rather decent nuisance within melee combat against swarmier style units, as they can definitely bring a decent amount of pain against enemy units that are a little bit weaker in nature. In any case, I think it's a perfectly fine fast attack choice, but it's definitely nothing exciting like we've seen in certain other lists in the past. Now moving along, we come to the final choice within this army list. This is a heavy support choice, and one that's a little bit different but has been gaining a little bit more popularity as we've seen in previous lists that we've covered in recent times. This heavy support choice is composed of a combination of Locust Destroyers and Heavy Locust Destroyers, this being a single unit of 6 Locust Regular Destroyers with 1 Heavy Locust Destroyer armed with a Gauss Destructor included within the ranks. This has kind of always been a little bit of a baffling combination, as the profiles that they bring to the table are decently enough different, as it does make them being in the same squad sometimes a little bit of a headache. However, there's definitely reasons to put them in this formation, as it definitely gives that Heavy Locust Destroyer a little bit more protection, and that Heavy Locust Destroyer can definitely just function as an additional Locust Destroyer if you just want him to do so. In any case, the Locust Destroyers are definitely something that's become more popular, considering their low points cost and their ability to put out a decent amount of mid-range firepower. However, the one thing I'm kind of surprised about is that considering you have that large block of Necron Warriors, and you have a decent amount of mid-range power within other units, it's kind of interesting to see the inclusion of these within a list like this, but it's not necessarily absolutely shocking, because while this list does have a decent amount of mid-range power, it doesn't have an incredible amount of it like we've seen in other situations. So all in all, I will say that the Locust Destroyers can still do a lot of work. It's just that I was kind of expecting a little bit more anti-armor, as armored lists are definitely becoming more popular, and this list does seem like it might have a little bit of a lack in that situation. However, between that Transcendent Catan and those 10 Lich Guard, as well as those Scorpic Destroyers, when they're supported with the different HQ choices, they can definitely put out a decent amount of damage and probably wreak some havoc against some armored targets. You're still going to struggle, but you're not necessarily dead in the water like certain lists might be. In any case, I do think it's an interesting list, and I do think it encompasses that idea that you should be able to experiment with different lists, because as I mentioned when covering previous Necron lists, you will definitely need a good reason not to include a Silent King within a list, because the Silent King is an incredibly powerful unit that brings a lot of buffs to the table. However, in this situation, this list decided to bring quite a good variety of HQ choices and rely on that Andrakir more than it did on the Silent King, thus giving it the ability to bring a little bit more volume of different types of units to the table and take more advantage of some of those different support units than say a list that would bring a Silent King over different options. That being said, even in a situation like this, you can definitely include a Silent King within a list like this, if you so desire, but it's definitely not mandatory. As I mentioned before, it's just something you have to have a good reason for, and we can see that the player in this situation definitely had their reasons and definitely performed rather well considering their placing and the size of the tournament. In any case, it's nice to see that large block of Necron warriors and some of the other units making a return where they've been missing from the meta for a little while, and it'll be interesting to see how the Necrons evolve within the future chapter approved. They'll be coming out reasonably soon, and when that happens, we'll have a better idea if this list holds up and how former lists do hold up as well. When the new chapter approved does come out, I will be revisiting the Necrons and other factions I've covered in the past to see how they've changed and how I can update some of my earlier videos. In either case, thanks for watching, and as I mentioned in the previous video, I did launch a web store, and the link for that web store will be in the description down below. This store carries all kinds of Warhammer 40k products, as well as different products from things like Pokemon and Magic the Gathering, and while I try to keep my pricing somewhat competitive, I will say the pricing on newer Magic the Gathering product is rather bad considering how low it goes for in the market. I will be making a more formal video kind of addressing that and other topics about the web store, as well as the future of the channel for the year of 2023 within the upcoming weeks, but I would like to see the chapter approved come out first. And as always, thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, do like and subscribe for future content, as well as share the video when you can because it definitely helps the channel out. Thank you again and have a great day. See you next time. Bye.